Have you ever wondered why some people seem to grasp the deepest truths about life, while others live their entire existence skimming the surface? Why is it that only a rare 1% of individuals, those we often call the chosen ones, seem to unlock the profound depths hidden within God's message? This isn't an accident. It's not luck or favoritism. It's because understanding the divine isn't about intelligence, religion, or even effort. It's about alignment, surrender, and an unshakable willingness to explore the unknown parts of yourself. And that path, the one that leads to the essence of God's message, is a path fewer than 1% are willing to walk. Let's start with the most uncomfortable truth. Most people don't want the truth. They say they do. They pray for clarity, they seek answers, but deep down, they're terrified of what those answers might demand of them, because the truth, when it arrives, often shatters everything you thought you knew. It asks you to let go of your ego, your attachments, your illusions of control. And for most people, that's too high a price to pay. Think about it. How often do we cling to our beliefs, not because they're true, but because they're comfortable? How often do we ignore the whispers of our soul because they contradict the noise of the world? Untrue sentiment, a worm flying through the mind. Here's the first thing you need to understand about God's message. It doesn't speak to your mind, it speaks to your soul. And the soul operates on a completely different frequency than the mind does. The mind craves logic, structure, and certainty. It wants to dissect, categorize, and label. But the soul thrives in mystery. It's not interested in answers, it's interested in experience. This is why the message of God often feels so elusive. It's not something you can figure out. You can't reduce it to words or concepts. It's something you have to feel, something you have to live. And that requires you to let go of your mind's need to control the process.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
But here's the paradox. Letting go isn't easy. In fact, it's one of the hardest things we can do. Why? Because we've spent our entire lives building an identity that's rooted in control. We define ourselves by what we know, what we believe, what we possess. To let go of that is to step into the unknown, to risk losing everything we think we are. And yet, that's exactly what God's message asks of us. He says, if you want to understand me, you must first lose yourself. So let me ask you, are you willing to lose yourself to find the truth? This is the question that separates the chosen ones from everyone else. Most people aren't willing. They'd rather stay in the safety of their illusions than venture into the uncertainty of the divine. But the 1%, the chosen ones, they know that the only way to truly live is to die to the self. Not a physical death, but a death of the ego, of everything false within you. And this death is not a one-time event, it's a continual process, a surrender that happens moment by moment, breath by breath. Now you might be wondering, what does it mean to die to the self? It means releasing your attachments to who you think you are. It means acknowledging that you are not your thoughts, your emotions, or even your body. You are something much deeper, something infinite, eternal, and beyond comprehension. But the only way to access that part of yourself is to let go of the false identities you've constructed. And this is where most people get stuck. They want to hold on to their ego and experience the divine, but you can't have both. The ego and the soul operate on completely different frequencies. To understand God's message, you have to choose. Will you cling to your ego, or will you surrender to your soul? And here's the thing, surrendering doesn't mean giving up. It doesn't mean becoming passive or weak. In fact, it's the opposite. Surrendering requires more courage, more strength, and more faith than anything else you'll ever do. Because when you surrender, you're stepping into the unknown. You're saying, I trust the universe, even though I don't understand it. I trust God, even though I don't have all the answers. And no doubt, surrender can mean a lot of other things too, and you will continue to go through the motions, remaining calm and holding on to each particle. And that kind of trust, that's what opens the door to the divine. But trust alone isn't enough. To truly understand the depth of God's message, you need to go even deeper. You need to cultivate presence. Because God doesn't dwell in the past or the future. God exists only in the now. Think about it. How often are you fully present? How often are you completely here in this moment without being distracted by thoughts of what was or what might be? For most of us, the answer is rarely. We spend so much of our lives living in our heads that we miss the magic of what's right in front of us. But the chosen ones, they know that the present moment is the gateway to the divine. They know that if you want to hear God's message, you have to quiet your mind and open your heart. So let me ask you again, are you present right now, or are you lost in thought, analyzing these words, trying to make sense of them? If you are, that's okay. Just bring yourself back. Take a deep breath. Feel the air entering your lungs, the sensation of your body sitting or standing, the sounds around you. This is where God speaks, not in the chatter of your mind, but in the stillness of your being. And here's the final piece for now. Understanding God's message isn't something you achieve. It's not a destination you arrive at. It's a journey, a process, a continual unfolding. The chosen ones understand this. They know that the divine is infinite, and that means there's always more to discover. They don't cling to their ideas of God. They allow those ideas to evolve, because they know that the moment you think you've understood God is the moment you've stopped growing. So, I'll leave you with this. What are you willing to let go of to understand the depth of God's message? Are you willing to release your need for control, your attachment to your identity, your fear of the unknown? Are you willing to step into the mystery, even if it means losing everything you thought you knew? These are the questions that only the 1% are willing to ask and answer, and that's what makes them chosen. If the first step to understanding God's message is surrender, then the second is learning to listen, not with your ears, but with your heart, your soul, and your very being. Because here's the thing, God doesn't speak in words. God speaks in presence, in silence, in the spaces between thoughts. And this is why so few people, only 1%, ever truly grasp the depth of the divine message. They're too busy listening for something external when the real communication is happening within. Think about the noise that fills your life. Not just the literal noise, the chatter of people, the sounds of traffic, the hum of technology, but the internal noise, your thoughts, your worries, your judgments, your endless mental commentary. How often do you actually pause and allow yourself to experience silence? For most of us, the answer is the language of God, like silence. And that's the problem, because silence is the language of God. It's where the divine speaks in ways that transcend words. But silence isn't comfortable, is it? When we sit in silence, we're confronted with ourselves, the parts of us we usually avoid. Our fears, our doubts, our insecurities, they all rise to the surface. And instead of facing them, most people run. They distract themselves with noise, with activity, with anything that will keep them from sitting still and looking inward. But here's the truth. If you can't face yourself, you can't face God, because the two are not separate. The divine is not some distant force residing in the sky or in a book. The divine is within you, and the only way to hear its message is to go inward. So let me ask you, when was the last time you sat in complete silence, not scrolling through your phone, not waiting for something to happen, but simply sitting, breathing, and being present with yourself? If the answer is, I don't remember, you're not alone. Most people avoid silence because it feels empty, uncomfortable, even threatening. But the chosen ones, the 1%, know that silence is not empty. It's full, it's alive, it's the space where God's presence is most tangible. Learning to listen to the silent language of God requires patience and practice. It's not something you achieve overnight, but it begins with a simple shift: the willingness to be still. When you sit in silence, you're not just doing nothing, you're creating a space for the divine to enter. You're saying, I'm here, I'm listening, I'm open. And in that space, something miraculous begins to happen. The noise of your mind starts to fade, the chatter of your ego quiets down, and in that stillness, you begin to sense something deeper. A presence, a peace, a knowing that goes beyond words. This is where the message of God begins to unfold, not as a voice in your head, but as an experience in your heart. It's subtle at first, almost imperceptible. You might feel a sense of calm, a lightness, a connection to something greater than yourself. And as you continue to sit in silence, this connection deepens. You begin to realize that the divine is not something you need to find. It's something you need to remember because it's been with you all along. But here's the catch: silence requires courage. It requires you to face the parts of yourself that you'd rather avoid, because before you can hear God's message, you must clear away the static that blocks it. And that static is your unprocessed emotions, your unresolved traumas, your limiting beliefs. These things create noise in your energy field, preventing you from fully receiving the divine message. So when you sit in silence, these things will come up, And when they do, you have a choice. Will you face them or will you run? The chosen ones, the 1%, choose to face them. They know that the only way out is through. They allow themselves to feel their pain, their fear, their grief, knowing that these emotions are not the enemy. They're the doorway. Every time you face a fear, every time you release an old wound, you're clearing a channel for God's message to flow through. And as you clear these channels, you begin to experience the divine in a way that words cannot describe. So let me ask you another question. What are you afraid to face in silence? Is it a past mistake, a hidden insecurity, or a truth about yourself that you've been avoiding? Whatever it is, know this: it's not as scary as you think. The fear comes from resisting it, not from facing it. And when you finally sit with it, you'll realize that it has no power over you. In fact, it's here to teach you something. Every fear, every wound, every shadow holds a piece of the divine message, but you can only receive it if you're willing to listen. Now, let's talk about how to cultivate this practice of listening. It doesn't have to be complicated. Start with just 5 minutes a day. Sit in a quiet space, close your eyes, and focus on your breath. When thoughts arise, and they will, don't fight them. Just notice them and let them go, like clouds passing in the sky. The goal isn't to stop thinking, it's to create a space where you can observe your thoughts without becoming attached to them. Over time, this space will grow, and in that space, you'll begin to hear the silent whispers of the divine. But listening isn't just about sitting in meditation, it's about how you show up in your daily life. Are you present with the people around you, or are you distracted? Are you fully engaged in what you're doing, or is your mind elsewhere? The chosen ones know that every moment is an opportunity to listen. Because God's message isn't confined to silence, it's everywhere. In the sound of the wind, the laughter of a child, the stillness of a sunrise. You can only hear it if you're paying attention. So here's the real question. Are you willing to slow down and listen? In a world that glorifies speed, productivity, and constant stimulation, listening is a radical act. It's a rebellion against the noise, and it's the only way to truly understand the depth of God's message. Because the divine doesn't shout, it doesn't demand your attention, it whispers, and only the still, the quiet, the present can hear it. This is why so few people grasp the depth of God's message. It's not because they're unworthy or incapable. It's because they're too distracted, too afraid, too caught up in the noise of life. But the 1%, the chosen ones, know that the greatest truths are found in the simplest moments. They know that understanding God's message isn't about doing more. It's about being more. Being more present, more open, more willing to listen. And so I'll leave you with this. What might you hear if you truly listened? Not just to the world around you, but to the still, small voice within. The answer to that question could change everything. Understanding the depth of God's message is not just about listening. It's about the transformation that follows. Because here's the reality, The divine doesn't reveal itself to satisfy your curiosity or provide comforting answers. It reveals itself to change you, to awaken you, to strip away everything that is false so that you can embody the truth. And truth, real truth, is not easy to carry. It's a burden, a responsibility, and a privilege that demands great sacrifice. This is why the 1%, the chosen ones, are set apart. They are the ones willing to pay the price, to let go of what no longer serves them, and to walk the narrow path, even when it feels impossible. Let's talk about what this sacrifice looks like. When you begin to understand the depth of God's message, you realize that it's not just about you. The ego wants to make it personal, to turn spirituality into a self-improvement project, a way to feel more enlightened or special. But the deeper you go, the more you see that God's message is universal. It's not about elevating you as an individual, it's about dissolving the illusion of separation between you and the whole. And that requires letting go of the ego, its desires, its fears, its endless need for validation. Think about how much of your identity is tied to things that are temporary. Your achievements, your possessions, your opinions, even your relationships. None of these things are inherently bad, but they are not who you are. They are layers, masks, roles you play in the world. And the more you cling to them, the harder it is to hear God's message. Why? Because the divine speaks to your essence, not your persona. It speaks to the part of you that is eternal, unchanging, and beyond all labels. But to connect with that part of yourself, you have to be willing to let the false parts fall away. So let me ask you, what are you afraid to lose? Is it your status, your comfort, your sense of control? Whatever it is, know this: the depth of God's message will ask you to release it. Not because God wants you to suffer, but because you cannot hold on to what is false and embrace the truth at the same time. Imagine trying to carry a heavy bag while reaching out to receive a gift. You can't do both. You have to let go of the bag first. And that bag, the one you've been carrying your whole life, is filled with everything you think you need but don't. It's filled with your fears, your attachments, your illusions. And the moment you let it go, you realize it was never yours to carry. But letting go isn't easy, is it? It feels like a kind of death. And in a way, it is. To understand God's message, you have to die to your old self. The self that was rooted in fear, in separation, in the belief that you are alone. This death is what spiritual traditions call ego death. And it's one of the most challenging experiences you'll ever face. But it's also the most liberating, because when the false self falls away, what remains is your true self, the part of you that is one with God, with the universe, with all that is. Here's the paradox: the more you let go, the more you gain. When you release your attachment to temporary things, you make space for the eternal. When you surrender your need for control, you discover a deeper kind of trust. And when you allow your ego to dissolve, you uncover a love so vast, so unconditional, that it transcends anything you've ever known. This is the love that lies at the heart of God's message. What it suggested is that while purchasing things, we are trying to acquire variety. A wide variety. It's not a love that asks for anything in return. It's a love that simply is, pure, infinite, and ever-present. But to embody this love, you must first confront your shadows. Because the ego doesn't go quietly. It clings, it resists, it fights to hold on to its illusions. And one of the ways it does this is by projecting your fears and insecurities onto others. Think about it. How often do you judge someone else for something that, deep down, you fear about yourself? How often do you blame the world for problems that originate within you? This is the work that the chosen ones, the 1%, are willing to do. They don't run from their shadows, they face them. They take responsibility for their own healing, knowing that the only way to transform the world is to transform themselves. End quote. So let me ask you another question. What part of yourself are you avoiding? Is it a painful memory, a habit you know is holding you back, or a truth you're not ready to accept? Whatever it is, know that it's not your enemy. It's your teacher. The parts of yourself that you resist the most are often the ones with the greatest lessons. They are the mirrors that show you where you are still attached, still asleep, still out of alignment with the divine. And when you have the courage to look into those mirrors, you begin to see clearly both the wounds that need healing and the light that has been there all along. This exercise can help you navigate the still, knowing present. This is the path of the chosen ones. It's not glamorous or easy. It's messy, raw, and often painful, but it's also deeply rewarding. Because every time you let go of something false, you make space for something true. Every time you face a shadow, you reclaim a piece of your light. And every time you surrender your ego, you step closer to understanding the depth of God's message. But let me be clear, this journey is not about perfection. It's not about becoming some ideal version of yourself. It's about becoming real. It's about stripping away everything that isn't you, so that what remains is pure, authentic, and aligned with the divine. And this process never ends. The chosen ones know that understanding God's message is not a destination, it's a lifelong journey. There will always be more to let go of, more to learn, more to discover. And that's the beauty of it. The divine is infinite, and so is your capacity to grow, to love, to awaken. So I'll leave you with this. What are you willing to sacrifice to embody the truth? Not as an abstract idea, but as a living reality. Are you willing to let go of your fears, your attachments, your illusions? Are you willing to face your shadows, to heal your wounds, to surrender your ego? These are the questions that only the 1%, the chosen ones, are brave enough to answer. And that's why they are the ones who truly understand the depth of God's message. The ultimate truth of God's message is not something you can simply understand, it's something you must become. This is the final step, the most profound realization and the hardest challenge. To truly grasp the depth of God's message is to embody it, to live it, to let it flow through you in every thought, word, and action. And this is where the 1%, the chosen ones, are separated from the rest. One thing I've learned about, they don't just seek the message, they become the message. They understand that the divine isn't something outside of them, It's something that must be expressed through them. But what does it mean to embody God's message? It means living in alignment with the truth you've discovered. It's one thing to have a spiritual awakening, to experience moments of connection and clarity, but it's another thing entirely to let that awakening transform your life. Because here's the thing, the depth of God's message doesn't just change how you feel, it changes who you are. It calls you to step into your highest self, to act from love instead of fear, to serve others instead of serving your ego. And that's not easy. In fact, it's the hardest thing you'll ever do. Think about it. We live in a world that thrives on illusion. Everywhere you look, you're bombarded with messages that tell you to chase success, validation, and material wealth. You're told that your worth is tied to your achievements, your appearance, your possessions. But God's message tells you something radically different. It tells you that your worth is infinite because you are a part of the divine. It tells you that love, not fear, is the foundation of reality. It tells you that the greatest act of power is surrender, and the greatest act of strength is compassion. Now let me ask you, are you willing to live by those truths even when the world around you doesn't? Because that's what it means to embody God's message. It means choosing love when it's easier to choose hate. It means standing in your truth when it's easier to conform. It means forgiving others when it's easier to hold on to anger. And it means trusting the divine plan, even when your mind doesn't understand it. But here's the hardest part. Embodying God's message doesn't just challenge the world around you, it challenges you. It asks you to live with integrity, to align every part of your life with the truths you've discovered. And that means letting go of anything that isn't in alignment. Toxic habits, relationships, thoughts, and behaviors, they all have to go. Not because they're bad, but because they no longer resonate with the truth of who you are. And this process of letting go is painful. It's like shedding an old skin, leaving behind the familiar to step into the unknown. But the chosen ones, the 1%, know that this is the price of transformation. They know that you can't hold on to the old and step into the new at the same time. So let me ask you, what parts of your life are out of alignment with the truth you feel in your soul? Maybe it's a relationship that no longer serves you. Maybe it's a job that drains your spirit. Maybe it's a belief about yourself that keeps you small. Whatever it is, know that God's message is calling you to release it. Not to punish you, but to free you. The divine wants you to be fully alive, fully present, fully yourself. But that can only happen when you let go of what's holding you back. And here's the beautiful part. When you embody God's message, you don't just transform your own life. You transform the lives of everyone around you. Because the truth is contagious. When you live in alignment with love, with peace, with compassion, you become a beacon for others. You don't have to preach. You don't have to convince anyone of anything. Your presence alone becomes a living testament to the divine. People will feel it. They'll see the way you move through the world with grace, with humility, with courage, and they'll be inspired to do the same. This is the true power of the chosen ones. They don't seek to dominate or control. They seek to uplift, to heal, to awaken. They understand that God's message isn't about building walls, it's about tearing them down. It's about dissolving the illusion of separation and reminding everyone that we are all connected, all part of the same divine whole. And this is why so few people truly embody God's message, because it's not about serving the self, it's about serving the world. But let me be clear, embodying God's message doesn't mean being perfect. The chosen ones are not saints or gurus. They're human, just like you. They have fears, doubts, and struggles. They make mistakes. But what sets them apart is their commitment to the truth. They don't let their failures define them. They don't let their fears stop them. They keep showing up day after day, moment after moment, choosing to align with the divine even when it's hard. This is why only 1% truly understand the depth of God's message, because it's not something you can simply hear or understand. It's something you must live. It's a journey, a process, a continual unfolding, and it's a path that few are willing to walk. But for those who do, the reward is beyond anything the mind can comprehend. It's not just peace or happiness or enlightenment. It's the realization that you are, and always have been, one with the divine. And that realization changes everything. So I ask you one final time, are you ready to become the living message? The choice is yours.